Morning, people. Do you want to hear a government minister actually say that the failure of British businesses in an industry that the government themselves say their Brexit has hurt is something the government should be proud of? Well, you're in luck, because here's Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch.
People are concerned about what the future is going to be like for the auto industry.
Interesting. So the UK car industry is having a hard time, which is why the Sky News presenter then asked her why her government refused to provide financial support to Volt when they were trying to set up a car battery factory.
So if a company is struggling to get investment from the private sector, I don't think that that's when government should be rushing in to bail it out. This is still a company that was in very early stages of planning. They hadn't built anything. And I think that the fact that it has struggled since is a testament to the very, very sensible decisions which officials in government and ministers took.
She's congratulating herself and her government because a British company that they promised to support has now failed after the government decided not to support them. And let's be clear, car companies like Ford, Jaguar, Nissan all warned before Brexit that their UK business models would not survive a hard Brexit, which is why this government paid them millions of pounds so they could afford to stay here. So the argument that that business struggling now proves the government was right not to help them doesn't make any sense, because Ford, Jaguar, Nissan would have all gone too if the government hadn't paid them. Also, this was Kemi Badenoch 5 months ago saying that Brexit has been especially traumatic for the UK car industry. So for her to brag about how UK car businesses fail when her government refuses to help them, while admitting that her government has made life harder for car companies via Brexit, is comically evil. But it gets worse.
You mentioned Stellantis a short while ago, of course. Vauxhall's parent company, and Ford have called on the British government to renegotiate your Brexit deal with the EU, because electric cars exported from the UK to the EU will have to meet these tighter rules of origin in the new year. When that comes in, it means that cars are going to be more expensive on the showroom. Do you think Brexit was really good for the British car industry?
Well, I think we need to be very clear about what they're talking about. This is a rule that was brought in with the Trade and Continuity Agreement. So this is our trade deal with the EU, has tariffs on rules of origin of car components if they're not from the UK and the EU. So this is something that applies to both sides. It's not something that applies just to UK car manufacturers. It applies to EU car manufacturers.
Her response to it being pointed out that Brexit is damaging the UK car industry was to say, hey, don't worry, we fucked Europe up as well.
When those rules were put in place, we didn't have COVID, we didn't have the war in Russia and Ukraine, we didn't have the supply chain disruption, which is now making rules which were perfectly fine previously less so.
Perfectly fine? Every car business in the UK was saying that these kind of rules and red tape would make their business models unsustainable after Brexit. And now she's saying that that additional cost would have been totally fine if not for COVID and Putin. But it still would have cost more. So it's like saying, I only stole a third of your food, so don't blame me that you starved to death. It's not my fault that those other two guys stole from you as well.
But to be clear, if Brexit hadn't happened, this wouldn't be an issue in the UK.
If Brexit hadn't happened, we would not have had a trade deal, and so we would not have had those specific rules in place.
Just so we're clear, we did have a trade deal. It was called the EU treaties, which allowed us to have completely frictionless trade with our main trade partners. So your phrasing is weird, but you are admitting that Brexit is damaging the UK car industry.
But I think it's really important to make sure that we talk about these things in the round. There are other things which we are able to do because we left the European Union, such as the CPTPP trade deal,
which your experts say will improve our economy by 0.08% compared to the 4% lost from Brexit.
Which means that we have rules of origin, rules that work with a lot of South Asia, for example. So that's a new market that's opened. We can't just trade with the people who are next to us. We have to trade with the whole world. And if that means adjusting our trading relationship to do so, then we will do so.
It's not a new market that's opened. We already traded with all the countries in that trade bloc, and the EU has trade deals with almost all those countries anyway. Meanwhile, you've damaged our trade with our main trade partners.
This is what having an independent trade policy looks like. When we were in the EU, we wouldn't have had any say at all on what the rules would be. And that's the problem that, say, German car manufacturers are having, where German trade ministers can't make those rules. They have to go up to speak to 27 representatives of 27 other countries to work out what's best for them. We don't have to do that anymore.
I'll say something that I rarely say. The efficiency of this Tory government is impressive. She managed to lie and then completely disprove her own lie within 15 seconds. Because listen again.
When we were in the EU, we wouldn't have had any say at all on what the rules would be.
But then she immediately talks about the EU Council of Ministers, where the ministers of each EU country vote on which rules the EU will set.
To 27 representatives of 27 other countries to work out what's best for them.
So within 15 seconds, she says we would have no say at all within the EU, and then here's how we would have a say within the EU. And as she just admitted, it is the fact that we no longer have the same rules as the EU that is damaging the UK car industry. So again, she is bragging about the damage that her government is doing to us. Now, if you are tired of this government deliberately hurting you, you need to make sure that you get on one of the free coaches that are being organised by the National Rejoin March and get down to London on Saturday the 23rd of September. Show the government and Labour that you will not tolerate politicians who deliberately make us poorer during a cost of living crisis. I'm Femi. Have a great week.